afternoon. Welcome to Maritime Connection. My name is Preston Milligan. Today on the show, when did you give your child a cell phone and why? Thanks for joining us this Sunday afternoon. 1-800-565-1940 is the toll-free number. Well, the group called Unplugged Canada is trying to educate parents about the risks of children spending too much time on smartphones or even using them at all until an appropriate age. Its vision, according to its website, is to, quote, restore childhood and authentic human connection. It's asking Canadians to consider a simple pledge: no cell phones for your children until they're 14 years old, which is about grade 9. How do you think your family would respond to that? That's what we're talking about today on the show. Our question for you to reflect on and then call us: when did you give your child a smartphone and why? You can email us too. The address is maritimeconnection@cbc.ca, and you can call us at 1-800-565-1940. My guest is Jenna Poste. She started the Nova Scotia chapter of Unplugged Canada, and she joins me in studio. Jenna, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Preston. It's great to be here.
What motivated you to get involved and to be part of this campaign called Unplugged Canada?
Well, I've been in tech for the last 20 years. I am an engineer and a product leader. I spent the beginning of my career actually at BlackBerry building smartphones.
You built smartphones?
Yeah, I was a part of the early generation of smartphones.
Did we call BlackBerry smartphones, or did they get smart after BlackBerry?
Yeah, they were one of the first ones to introduce, browsers and getting more than just, phone and text on it. So I think many people think of the iPhone as maybe the first smartphone because of the applications on there as well, though.
So you're not just a worried mom. You're also someone who knows the tech industry, who knows how these phones work, knows about algorithms and social media. Tell me more about your background with social media.
Yeah, I actually spent almost 10 years building applications to identify and remove harmful content on social media. So I've worked with technology, I've worked with AI. I understand the incredible, powerful benefits it can provide, but I deeply understand, some of the risks that it provides, especially introducing it to kids at a young age who aren't developmentally yet ready for it.
So the social media giants and the tech giants, they know that there are organizations like this one who are trying to limit smartphone usage and addiction and screen time, etc. How do you think they're pushing back against people like you?
Well, I think that their narrative is that they think that parents just need to teach their kids how to manage it safely. But in reality, these products are built to be addictive. And they know
many parents just won't do that.
Yeah, I mean, parents are tired. They're busy. This stuff is complicated. Not everybody maybe has the ability to sit down and understand the intricacies of trying to make a smartphone safe for a child. And so they try to lean into that narrative to kind of put it back on the parents. But in reality, they know what they're doing, and they're creating these apps to be addictive so they can addict our kids early so they can become users later on.
There are very little subtle changes in the way we scroll and the content that we see and the timing that you start to see that, yes, exactly what you're talking about. They're designed, the way we scroll is designed to keep us going. Mm-hmm. The reels, I was saying to George before the program, they seem to be an infinite list of reels that you can watch, whether it's cute corgis doing funny things or, parkour, you name it, right? It just keeps coming. It keeps coming. All right, we're getting off topic here, but our question today is, when did you give your child a cell phone and why? My guest is Jenna Poste, and she started the Nova Scotia chapter of the organization called Unplugged Canada with a simple pledge in mind: no cell phones, no smartphones rather, for your children until they reach the age of 14. 1-800-565-1940 is the toll-free number. We have a caller from Kentville. Erin Boudreau is on the phone. Erin, welcome.
Hi, thanks so much, Preston.
You're welcome.
I have a question as it relates to children who are maybe a little bit different. So my daughter has ADHD, and I'm just wondering if this means that her having a smartphone wouldn't really affect her in the same way that it would affect her peers. I'm just wondering a bit about how that affects children who may be a little bit different.
Such a good question. I think there are hundreds of parents with the same question in mind.
Yeah, and I won't say that I'm an expert in this, but actually one of the other parents who actually helped found the Nova Scotia chapter, she has a child who is neurodiverse. And so, this is something that we were trying to look into a little bit more to help parents. And I think what we do know is that, children, especially with ADHD, they lack the dopamine in their bodies. And so screens tend to be, what actually helps you get that hit of dopamine, so they tend to seek it out even more, and they can be even more susceptible to the addiction and the impacts on their behaviors. So it's definitely something that I think parents with children who are neurodiverse need to understand and consider, and we're hoping to, with this initiative as well, to help provide parents more resources for that to understand.
I've never heard that explanation before, the lack of dopamine, and the phones kind of replace that a little bit.
Absolutely.
Wow. Erin, what do you think?
That makes total sense, actually, now that I'm sitting here thinking about it. I can see how that would affect them in that way. That makes sense. And it definitely gives me more to consider about, we haven't given a phone yet, but I was debating it. And now I'm not really sure if it's a great idea.
All right. Well, congrats to Jenna, my guest here, for reaching you with this pledge and this concept. What do you think of the pledge, Erin? Is this something that you would? It sounds like you're considering it, but what do you think of that? No smartphones for your children until they're 14 years old. Would you do that?
Yeah, I think I would consider doing something like that. I think that, that could be beneficial. So I would just sign the pledge saying that I'm not doing this as a parent.
Yeah, so, what the pledge is kind of meant to do is help give parents that visibility that there are more people who are concerned about this and are kind of stepping up to say, we'd like to change these norms. And so it may feel kind of simple, like just signing a pledge, but what that does is just show there's more people out there who are concerned and who want to delay, and then more people who do stand up and do, then more will follow. I think right now we're in a situation where parents are in an impossible choice at the moment, that pretty much everybody has one, so they feel, even those who don't really want to, they have to. And so this gives an opportunity to start to shift that narrative and shift that pressure to be the other way, that if less people give their kids a smartphone, more people will feel they can delay and they'll feel empowered. And I think that's part of it. It's empowering parents.
Yeah, and it kind of seems like where I live, it's not something that's talked about a lot, so I don't really know if I have other parents that I could lean on or talk to about this. But that would be to get that support would be awesome.
Erin, stand by. Jenna, tell us about the upcoming information session you have.
Yeah.
Where that'll be and what'll happen there.
So we're organizing a session for January 16th. It's going to be, there's an in-person part at Hammonds Plains Consolidated School, and then there's also a virtual stream available to make it accessible to anybody in Nova Scotia. And what the goal there is to have a session we can open up this conversation for parents, inform them some of these risks, give them some alternatives to consider, share some resources, and start to create that parent community to allow parents to help start having these conversations in their own communities. And we have a link that you can go to register. It's at unpluggedcanadaNS.eventbrite.com, because we do want to have a sense of numbers, so you can register either for the in-person or the Zoom live stream. And our team, there's a handful of us who kind of started this chapter, want to have more events, but that is the first one that we're kicking off. And, the other thing I would say too is, potentially send them this conversation afterwards. If we get more parents just talking about it, and that's kind of my hope with this, is that if we start talking about it, people will feel more comfortable to bring it up with their kids' closest friends' parents. Because if you can start with that small group, then you can have that immediate impact with your kids, and then more and more people will start to talk about it and share that similar kind of discussion.
Erin, thanks so much for your call. Anything else on your mind?
No, that's great. Thank you so much for the info. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thanks for calling in. 1-800-565-1940 is the toll-free number. Today on the show, we're asking, when did you give your child a cell phone, and why? Tanya Jones is calling from Halifax. Hi, Tanya. Welcome.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much. So I just wanted to mention that I am in complete agreement with what your guest is saying. However, having gone through the pandemic, it ultimately resulted in, sort of the choice was taken away, because you kind of had to use that, as a result of the only way for education to happen. So I, again, being in complete agreement, was, I guess, maybe hopeful that the information that your guest is sharing would be maybe brought into the education system, like up to the point that it would be maybe like a course, I'm going to say like in maybe elementary, junior high, high school, so that people realize like what they're kind of like using, and so then they'll be using it as a tool, recognizing its limits.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately the pandemic did accelerate the adoption of this technology because of the necessity during that time. And I think that you make a great point as far as it would be amazing if we had more support within the education system to teach kids, how to use this safely when it is age appropriate and they are ready, and give them tools to look for, the signs that there could be harmful content they're getting access to, or making sure they know they have people they can speak out to and talk to about it.
Well, no, exactly right. I mean, as an example, right now at high school, there's like a cell phone policy that, phones aren't used during, as in it's a complete ban, which is also a completely cool idea. And then, and I'm being repetitive and then I'll stop saying this, it's just, I think it's really important because I don't think that people know. You do because this is your line of work. Other people kind of don't know, and when you're surrounded with it, then I think it would be nice if somehow, again, through your efforts, if you maybe could find a way to get within the education system just to sort of, describe what people are using. Because I'm not 100% sure that that's done, because it wouldn't be because it's cell phones.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the hope with this sort of initiative and getting the ability to have this kind of conversation and reach as many people as we can, because the more we can reach and, again, inform people so they can make a decision for their family. I think everyone's different. Every kid is different. And as much as we can just give people the information to then make that decision themselves and then ideally talk about it within their community.
Exactly right. No, exactly right. And so I guess just last point that it is easier to have a discussion if you provide people education, because then you'll know, I guess, what you're talking about. So again, thank you. Really good idea. And have a nice afternoon.
Tanya, just before I let you go, I really thank you for calling in. The question was, when did you give your child a cell phone and why? Does that apply to you?
Well, I didn't have a choice. Look, I didn't have a choice, right? Because I lived through the pandemic, right? So I literally didn't have a choice, right? Had I had a choice, I'm in agreement with your guest. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
1-800-565-1940 is the toll-free number. I hear what Tanya's saying. Yeah, it's the pandemic was an exceptional time, and we all relied on our devices more so than ever. But I wonder if, when you think about exposure and screen time, is it the content, Jenna, that we should be worried about most, or just the amount of time, or just that sort of mechanical crutch that we have to pick up our phone and just look at it?
I think it's a bit of a combination. I think one is, screen time in general is a little bit nuanced. Watching a movie in your family room with your family is very different than consuming TikTok in your bedroom at 10 o'clock at night as a 10-year-old. So I think it is about the intent. Like, what's the intent? Is it for education? Is it for entertainment? What is the means? Is what you're doing at a large screen or small? And again, what kind of content you're looking at.
Okay. 1-800-565-1940 is our toll-free number. Give us a call and let us know what you think of this. The pledge suggested by Jenna and her group is to not give your child a cell phone until they turn 14 years of age. So we're asking, when did you give your child a cell phone and why? Jenna, are there specific types of phones that you think are less harmful, like, say, limited access to educational apps, or ones that will at least allow you to text family members, that kind of thing?
Yeah, there's been actually quite a bit of options come out in the last year or two as this shift is starting to happen. One is the pinwheel phone has recently come to Canada, and so that is a phone that's been built for kids and parents in mind from the beginning. So it allows phone and texting. It has GPS and music, things that are tools and not harmful to children. And then there is an app store that has parent-approved apps, but it does not allow social media, and it does not allow an open browser. Yeah. So it can look and feel like a cool smartphone from the child's perspective, but it doesn't actually come with the harms or the exposure risks that an iPhone will provide.
Right. I saw your interview with Amy Smith on TV on CBC television earlier in the week, and you were talking about how you were kind of inspired by the author Jonathan Haidt, and you can tell me more about him, but his book is called The Anxious Generation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And essentially he talks about a cohort of kids who grew up using their phones, using their smartphones, and the damage that'll do. But just as parents, the damage that we've inflicted on our children just by over-parenting, by kind of bubble wrapping their lives, not letting them near merry-go-rounds. You know, you know what I'm getting at here. We just so are overwhelmed, obsessed with keeping our children safe that it's kind of diminishing returns at this point. Do you think that this effort to now start limiting access to smartphones may fall into that same category?
Yes, I think that, what Jonathan kind of outlines in that book is the impact that widespread adoption of smartphones in children has been leading to this shift. It also was the introduction of social media, and it was the, more limits on independence and free play as parents became more concerned about their physical world and the risks in that. But I think we're unaware of how much risk they were introducing in the digital world as they made that shift. And so that is a lot of what the book talks about is yes, he goes through a whole bunch of very scary data and research that now reflects back on a generation that kind of grew up with smartphones in their life very young, to actually giving us clear actions, which is why those 4 actions are no smartphones before high school, no social media before 16, phone-free schools, ideally bell to bell, and more independence and free play in the real world. And that's something that I found has been inspiring from the book. It's not just talking about all the problems. It actually gives us some tangible actions that parents can be a big advocate to take the first step and be able to make this change.
Okay, let's go take another call. Spencer Cook is on the phone in Spryfield. Hey, Spencer, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. I'll be real brief. I just wanted to thank you for having the topic on, and particularly to Jenna for her work.
Thank you.
It.
All right.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Spencer. Let's go to Rylan Higgins. He's on the phone in Ketch Harbor. Rylan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks.
So let me just start again. I just want to remind our audience, the question is, when did you give your child a cell phone or smartphone, and why?
Yeah, so I'll answer that. He was 12 when we gave him a cell phone, and it was a smartphone. It was an iPhone, kind of the lower-end one. Why did I do it? It's a really good question. He never really pressured us for one, and at one point we just decided to go for it, which was in some ways a bad idea. And it's partly why I'm calling in, is just to sort of lump some praise on your guest, Jenna is her name, and explain that I think this idea of doing it at 14 is great, and maybe even bump it up to 16. It makes no sense to me. This even the part about the pandemic, quite frankly, this idea that we had to have cell phones for the pandemic. Quite honestly, as an anthropologist who studies North American society and the pandemic itself and childhood, I actually don't buy that. I think it's actually a bit of a cop-out, quite frankly, this idea that we had to have our devices during the pandemic. I get it at some level, but I think it's quite significantly overstated. And so I just want to, really just lump praise on your guest for this initiative, and actually invite her, if she wants, to present in my class at St. Mary's. If she's interested.
Yeah, definitely get in touch. I'd love to talk more.
Let me know how to do that. I will absolutely get in touch.
Okay, Rylan, I've got your number here, so I'll flip you a text after the show if that's okay.
That'd be awesome. Thanks.
Everything you need to know. I'm curious to know about your impressions of about smartphone usage, and you kind of pushed back on the idea that we needed our devices. Could we push back maybe on the idea that we knew when our children were 10, 11, 12 years old? I think we knew that giving them a smartphone, giving them a device to keep them occupied, and to give us as parents a little break, we knew that was the wrong thing to do. So in some ways it's not a revelation, that we. But But I think, Jenna, what you're saying is if enough of us, it's only going to work if enough of us get on board with this.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think it's about this shift in the pressure. Like, people feel the pressure to, you maybe said you didn't feel the pressure from them or your child asking for it, but I think many do. The other thing I see a lot too is like parents feel like they have to give it because they're going to be maybe coming home and be all alone, for a few hours after school. And so they want to make sure they're safe. But there are other ways in which you could give them a different way to communicate other than a smartphone. But I think we all just sort of default, and I even did up until a few months ago, just assumed that was the only option until I started to do more research and dive more into this topic about alternatives out there. And you kind of just realize, there's more than just this one option. And the more people that choose it, the more we'll all be able to take that path.
Why are parents so concerned about things like, I don't want my children to be alone? We're talking about Gen X kids who grew up at a time when we thought our parents don't care if we're alone. They locked us out of the house until 7 o'clock at night. They don't care if we're alone.
I think that is something that maybe parents need to, reflect on, to say, we couldn't get a hold of our parents during school or at any point in time. They didn't know where they were. I remember times where like I'd get left at, for pickup and my parents forgot to come pick me up and I just had to wait until they came. Yeah. And, I think we just need to remind ourselves that we grew up differently and technically the world is actually safer than it was decades ago. That's what's interesting. If you look at the data, is the world is actually safer, and yet we seem to be more concerned of the risks and want to overprotect our kids in that way.
Yeah, and to my mother, if she's listening, I know we were never locked out of the house until 7 o'clock, although we were locked out of the house many, many times for our own good, apparently. 1-800-565-1940 is the toll-free number. Today we're talking about smartphone usage and the appropriate time to start using them. My guest is Jenna Poste, and she's with an organization called Unplugged Canada. So we're asking, why did you give your child a cell phone? When did you give your child a cell phone, and why? 1-800-565-1940 is the toll-free number. You can send us an email as well. The address is maritimeconnection@cbc.ca. How do you suggest, Jenna, that parents kind of balance the potential benefits of smartphone usage with their children and the potential risks?
Well, I think it is just, again, that introducing at age-appropriate times. I think you can introduce technology to your children, at those younger preteen ages, but just in a way that if you're doing it with them and you have it in a open space and you don't give them an individual device just yet. And then when you are starting to introduce that individual device and smartphone to them, just help educate them on, again, the risks that they need to be aware of, that help them understand that they may see things that they don't intend to and that they can talk to you. And I think that they also need to look at it like a tool. It can be an incredible tool. There's lots of positive things from an education perspective, from, leveraging it in their studies, that, we don't want to just take it all away. It's about having that balance. And I think parents just need to, unfortunately, there's a lot that you need to do to educate yourself how to help do that safely. And that's where we're trying to have these kind of sessions to help simplify that for parents and simplify the information.
Okay, let's take another call. Monica Dutt is calling from Sydney. Monica, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Welcome to the program. I think I recall your name before. I believe it's Dr. Dutt, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to call in to say that I really love the approach of waiting for providing a cell phone to your kid. I did give my son a cell phone at 12. We don't have a landline. He was babysitting. He's incredibly independent, so he could call and he could text. He doesn't have other apps. So just that approach, I think, is a good one. If you need to find ways to communicate, you can do that without a full smartphone suite of applications.
Okay, and you gave your child a cell phone at 12 years of age. What is the danger of giving your child a cell phone at 12 years of age and letting them, use it the way any adult might use it, giving them full access to the internet and social media, etc.?
I think at that time, I just wanted him to be able to interact more with people in other ways apart from being on a phone. And we definitely had lots of fights about Snapchat and all the apps that, quote unquote, all his friends have. But in the end, I've got a child who, like, he calls his friends to talk to them. He tells me not to text people because he says, Ma, just, like, pick up the phone, call them. And so I feel like in the end, it's made him better at communicating. It's not, I've seen him and his friends with all his friends on their phones, and he's not. And sometimes you feel a little alone, but I think in the end, it's much more, supportive of creating relationships in other ways.
Dr. While I have you on the phone, we got an email from Lisa Dykman a moment ago, and she touches on something that I think you can probably relate to a little bit. Jenna, you as well. She says, I'm a parent of a 12-year-old in competitive sports, and we haven't had to deal with this issue yet, but we know other parents who have. Some sports teams have started using social media platforms, specifically Snapchat, to communicate with team members. My issue here is that I'm trying to avoid social media with my child, and now, as a parent, we are isolating our children from their friends by not allowing them to have apps like Snapchat to communicate with team members. Do you have any advice? Lisa's question, do you have any advice on how to deal with this as parents, but also how to educate coaches and team managers to use other platforms for its communication? Jenna, what do you think?
I think that's an interesting shift again we're seeing in society, where if this is what sports teams are advocating their teammates to use as communication, I think we need to maybe just revisit that, because I think it's hard if the coaches are kind of pushing that, and that's where the kids are. Parents don't want to isolate their kids. They don't want to be the one left out, and that's going to be difficult to create those relationships when it's amazing those kids are in sport, because that is also declining. But we need to as parents and coaches just step up and I think revisit that and realize that there's lots of other apps out there. There's the Bench app, there's Team Snap, there's all kinds of communication apps built for sports teams that don't land on social media.
Yeah, 100%. Dr. Dutt, any final thoughts from you?
I think, again, just supporting some of the points that have been made. There's great statements from organizations like Canadian Pediatric Society and others that, emphasize some of the same points, that it's not necessarily only having the screen. It's how it's used, why it's used, when you're using it with, other people. So I do think there's really great guidance about how to use screen time appropriately that supports your child's development.
Nice to chat with you again, Monica. Thanks for your call.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks to Lisa Dykman for her email as well. If you want to email us, please go ahead and do that. The address is maritimeconnection@cbc.ca. We have another caller from Halifax. Dr. Carrie Crofton is on the phone. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Preston.
What's on your mind?
Well, first of all, I want to commend Jenna and Unplugged Canada for much-needed education of other parents. This is a real challenge for parents. I was fortunate when my kids were younger. We didn't give them smartphones. They had to wait till they were older, and they got them themselves. But we also had a landline, and I counsel parents actually on this, and I encourage them, get back your landline. And if you have to, my kids were young now, I get them the so-called dumb phone, or what Jenna is talking about, the pinwheel, because there's so many issues that are concerned for many of us with young kids and screens, whether they're phones or iPads or tablets or whatever.
I'm just looking at a little dossier about you, Dr. Crofton, and this is something that you're kind of passionate as well. Less screen, more green.
Now, how did you find out so quickly?
Well, I've got a laptop.
Good scrolling. Well, I've been in touch with Jenna, and I'm hoping to also be part of what she's offering on January 16th. And also, Jenna's had some great ideas about what you can give kids. The problem is when you're trying to entertain, self-soothe, self-regulate kids with phones. And we need a real mind shift with parents. Giving your child a smartphone is not keeping them safe. Mm-hmm. So I have learned a lot from Jenna. So Jenna, would you share some of the things that you've worked out with your own family? Because I think that's really inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me and my husband, we've been very conscious about the introduction of technology in our family. When I was pregnant with my first, we actually read a book called Brain Rules for Baby, and it actually talked the key takeaways were around, basically the delayed gratification and how important that is in child's development. And so that is something that you sort of see with devices, is that it's kind of that instant gratification. So we have been very, very intentional with how we introduce technology. I think, again, we are limited in our home. We love doing family movies together, and we'll watch educational stuff together, but that's how we've taken the approach. And the landline thing is something we're actually looking into, like getting back to that landline, because, in a couple years, our kids will be old enough to come home and be home alone for a few hours. So if they wanted to be able to reach out just to be safe, we want to get that. There's some great options out there. There's one called Fongo, which is only $5 a month, and you can get a landline. And I honestly now don't even want to assume that babysitters coming into our home are going to have a phone. So I want to make sure they feel when they come to our house, they still have a way they could reach their parents or reach us if needed.
Interesting. Dr. Crofton, I want to get your take on something that Carrie mentioned earlier in the program. We had a caller who said, what about kids who live with neurodiversity, maybe the ADHD? And Carrie said, well, they lack the dopamine. They don't have that function like the rest of us do. And cell phones, smartphones, and social media kind of provide that instead. What is a good alternative, I guess, for the neurodiverse children to kind of soothe, I don't know if that's the right word, but to substitute what they're not getting, the dopamine, they're using their phones to do that. How can you fix that? That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, Jenna was absolutely right. That's part of the addictive nature, and it's wonderful, Jenna, with all your experience, because when I did a lot of research in this, I found out that the Gates didn't give their kids smartphones until they were 16, and now they said they should have delayed them later. Steve Jobs invented the iPad, but he said my kids don't use it. So it's wonderful that she has that tech background. And she's right that the lack of dopamine is a real concern with neurodiverse children. But children that are on the spectrum and have any kind of sense of attention challenges, the last thing you want them to have is a screen in front of them. I mean, I once did a presentation with the autism group, and the speaker before me wanted to give all the kids iPads. So there's a real concern with not only the addictive nature and the eye health, but many of the kids now who've been diagnosed with ADHD are probably just because of spending so much time on smartphones and other screens.
Interesting. Thanks so much for calling into the show. It's nice to hear your thoughts on this, Dr. Crofton.
Thank you so much, and thanks again, Jenna. And I really hope people really sign up for your January 16th. I think it's going to be really helpful. Thank you.
All right. Just in case we happen to have a new group of listeners, Jenna, tell us more about you've got an information session coming up. I believe you said in Hammonds Plains. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so we've got a session coming up on January 16th. It starts at 6:30. There's an in-person piece in Hammonds Plains Consolidated, but we're also offering a virtual stream just to make it more accessible to folks. And so you can go to unpluggedcanadans.eventbrite.com, and you can sign up there, because we just want to make sure we have a sense of numbers as this is getting a lot of interest, and we want to make sure we can support folks. But there is a virtual option you can sign up for on Zoom, and the goal of that, again, is to dive a bit more into the research and the data and the impacts, giving parents alternatives to consider, starting to kind of create that community, advocating for us to have these conversations in our communities, and then additional resources that they can take away as well.
Okay, we got an email a moment ago from Carrie. Carrie, thanks for your email. She writes to say, my son thanked me later for the 1 hour per day computer screen time, no phone, TV in bedroom. We did not have arguments about it at the time, but I know his friends had lots of screens and much more approved access. He did have goals, career goals, and we had an agreement starting in junior high. As long as he made the grades, I did not say anything, his homework or school projects. He had a part-time job in high school, but did not purchase his own phone until university. Carrie, thanks so much for your thoughts on this. Nice to hear from you. We have another email for our phone call from Diane Doan from Halifax. Diane, welcome to the show.
Yes, hi, thanks very much. I just have a question here. I heard on the show that we need to entertain our children. This will help with entertaining them. And my question is, do we need to entertain our children?
I don't know, maybe I said that accidentally, did I?
No, I think it was somebody else that said it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think maybe we feel that way. I think parents feel like you have to entertain your children, but I think if you actually let them sit in that maybe boredom, which I think feels like a scary word for many people, how creative they can get, and they can find their own ways to entertain themselves and let them just be kids and get them outside as much as you can. And I think that is a misconception, though, that we feel like we have to be the entertainers for our children 24/7 or give them something that will be that entertainment for them.
Yeah. I mean, kids...
So too. I do have one other thing I'd like to mention. 12 years of age is the time when people are going through puberty. And it seems like if they could do puberty and then do the smartphone after puberty's over, even 16, that's what they're doing in New Zealand or Australia, because 12 is right at that's the hard time of puberty. That's the only other point I wanted to make.
Absolutely. That's exactly what Jonathan Haidt has said in much of the youngest generation. And you're seeing that, like you said, in legislation coming out around the world is, that age 16, it's not dissimilar to driving. We realize at one point what age are they mature enough to take on that kind of responsibility. And so, get them through that most vulnerable years without this technology, and they will be very much more benefited.
Yeah. Diane, any other thoughts?
No, that's all. That's all. Thank you very much. This is a great show.
All right. Thanks a lot, Diane. 1-800-565-1940 is the toll-free number if you want to join our conversation. We're talking about screen time, essentially, smartphone access for children, and the pledge that's being floated by my guest to limit or not to introduce smartphones to your children until they reach the age 14. Excuse me for my hoarse voice. I'm coming off cold, so that's why I'm mumbling a little bit. 1-800-565-1940 is the toll-free number. How do you think, Jenna, the program is working at schools you were talking bell to bell, no cell phones in the classroom, put it in your pocket or lock it in a locker. Is that working as far as you're hearing?
Yeah, everything I'm hearing, obviously, I think the first few weeks were definitely a challenge. I mean, it was difficult for parents, teachers, kids, administration to adjust, but the benefits that we're hearing from the folks who, especially the middle school and high schools, have implemented even stricter policy than what was mandated by the province, which is a true bell-to-bell. They are saying the kids are making eye contact again, they're engaging more in class, there's less behavioral issues, there's less anxiety issues, and the kids are having fun and playing again. Yeah. And so, I think this has been a great first step for the province to introduce, and I'm glad to see that at least in elementary, it was a full bell-to-bell policy. They have left it up to middle schools and high schools to decide if they want to take it, further than just being excluded from the classroom. So I think that's a misconception out there that it is full bell-to-bell across the province. Right. But many have, and I think that's amazing, and I hope more take the lead and take that step to continue to progress more towards that bell-to-bell.
Right. I know there are probably parents listening and thinking, my kids are 20 plus years old. I wish I had taken more time to really monitor and to limit their screen time. At that point, it's too late, or is it?
I don't think it's too late, and I honestly don't think parents should try not to feel bad about that, because I don't think we had enough information about the impacts either. So, we can only do better when we know better, and I think now we do have more information that we can consider in making decisions. But I think it's always worth opening up the conversation with your 20-year-old to, talk about their relationship with technology. What is your relationship with technology, and reflecting even yourself? Because I think as adults, these devices are addictive, even for us. And I think I've been very much looking at my own usage and what I can do even more to be more thoughtful in that. And I think everybody has a chance to still reconsider what their behavior is now.
How much can you share with us about what it's like working for social media and tech, knowing that these conversations happen, that we want to wean ourselves off it? And they know we want to wean ourselves off it, but they're fighting back against it. they seem to be winning that.
They are. I think it is partially because of the power they have with the amount of money they can put behind lobbying against this. It is something like, in my own job, like I'm working on building an application. It's for well-being, but I am constantly checking myself on that ethical side to say, like, yes, obviously I want to drive engagement in the product, but I'm trying to balance that to say, how can I make sure that engagement is just what's necessary and is for the better good, and the benefits outweigh any of the negative impacts.
Okay. We got an email from Melissa Cooper, and she says, I have a little one on the way, and I'm looking forward to signing the pledge myself, but I thought I'd weigh in with my conversation was with a friend when her daughter was 12 or 13. All of her daughter's friends had smartphones and were on social media, and she felt really isolated and left out because of conversations that were happening online that spilled into the classroom in school. For example, so much of pop culture references, friend groups sending Instagram pictures, etc. It was really difficult for her to feel like she was keeping her daughter away from that socialization. They met in the middle-ish with allowing a smartphone, but only one social media app that her mom had access to as well. But of course that didn't last very long, so she's curious about the best strategies to combat that. Melissa Cooper, thank you so much for that email. I think you really nailed the struggle that a lot of parents have when it comes to limiting their children's access. Because once you do that, if the horse is already out of the barn and they have TikTok and Snapchat or whatever they're using, you can't take it away after that.
Well, you know what? I actually would probably say that parents have the right to change their mind once they have new information, right? So I think that, again, the parents that maybe have given the phone and they maybe wish they didn't have to because of the pressure they felt, talk to those close parents of their friends and just see if you can open that conversation up to say, what can we do together? If we can do this together and it's that small group and they're not alone, you have more of a chance to actually make a change. It's not easy, but that's why, again, I'm hoping these conversations are becoming more common and more folks can decide. It's not easy. There's actually Dr. Becky is a great resource. She gives parents scripts that they can use to have these kind of conversations of either if they're asking and you want to continue to delay, how to say it in a way that will make them feel like you understand the struggle this is for them. But then also if you want to make changes, she just has some really great ways to kind of approach those conversations.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Becky. David Adelman is on the phone in Fredericton. David, welcome to the show.
Hi. I just turned you on and my head blew up, and I can't believe what I'm hearing. And I'm sure nobody's going to agree with me, but my simple answer to your question, when is it the right time to give your kid a smartphone? Never. Mm-hmm. Why would you give your kid a smartphone? I mean, it seems pretty obvious that this is a dangerous thing, but why would you give it to them? I would say that they can have it when they can buy it themselves. When they're old enough, mature enough, organized enough to get the hundreds of dollars together to buy it and to pay for the whatever plan they've got with it.
Right.
Why would you give it to them?
Right. Well, on behalf...
I don't understand. I mean, we got by without him. Why would you? I mean, is this the same as giving your kid a TV that they can have in their bedroom years ago? I mean, I don't have to face this problem myself. My kids have to maybe face it with their kids, but I don't have to face it with any children at home. But it just baffles me.
Right. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Jenna, what do you think? I mean, I think there are probably a lot of parents who, when smartphones started becoming a thing, when was that, 2006 to 10, around there somewhere?
Yeah, around 2010.
I mean, all we had to worry about, you gave your kid a smartphone because they wanted to play Angry Birds, was my memory of it, right?
Absolutely. I think that's what exactly happened. I think we all were excited about this technology. We thought it was going to be so beneficial to them, and there was really only going to be positive benefits from it. I don't think anybody initially was thinking about or even had the data on the negative impacts. So I think that's what started it. And then it just kind of kept growing where more and more people got it. And then now we're kind of hitting that point where we're looking back and seeing the negative effects and very much more aware of it. And now it's like, okay, we have to do something. Right. Now it's time to start taking action.
Right.
And even the reference of 14, I think that's where we're starting as far as like, let's just try to push it to 14. But even Jonathan Haidt, even throughout the year, I've heard him say even wanting to push that up to 16 or even 18 at some point. But we've got to start somewhere. So that's why it's even being recommended just to kind of high school at this point.
You've given thought to alternatives that parents can consider to smartphones. What are some of those?
Yeah, so there's, I think, a couple different things. One would be that, like, for me, with a 5 and 7-year-old home, my first one would be that home phone and just get something there, having a family computer. So you can give them access to some of this, information out there and the technology, but maybe in a more controlled environment where that's supervised and not their own personal device. Then you can introduce either that more simple phone that's just talk and text, or else something like the pinwheel phone that's a bit more advanced, that gives you the music and the GPS and other beneficial applications. And then eventually, when you do want to introduce it, or you feel like that's the best point, is just making sure you have your eyes open on how to make it as safe as possible. So I think that there are a lot more alternatives being introduced. It's actually becoming quite a popular product to go after, because I think they're just clearly the response today. There's a lot of parents who would love that if they knew it was available.
Okay, we are getting a good response to our question, our show today, and we got a number of callers, which we'll try to get through in our final 10 minutes here. David, thanks so much for your call. Our next caller is Sharon Greenlaw. Sharon, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Sharon from Grand Manan. Welcome to the show.
Yes, well, thank you. We've had internet here and that sort of thing since, I think, 1988, and my kids really benefited a lot from it. The idea that I can't see us getting past is not that the kids have the problem, it's the parents have the problem, and the government that we actually don't email anymore, because we have no reason not to, that there is a timer. Like, we have an app that actually says this phone goes off except for emergency calls to so many people at 8 o'clock at night and comes on 8 o'clock in the morning, or whenever the teacher needs to have it used in school. There's no reason that those kind of apps can't be worked and used and out there. And the idea that there's not a Google Play Store or any Play Store that says these ones are actually absolutely beneficial. I don't know if you've seen Khan Academy or some of the coding programs. If you want to buy them for your kids, if you don't have the money to send them to university, these things are $17, $18 a month for the $40,000 course, teaching you all kinds of programs. And the idea that we would cut this out because we're not smart enough to go tell those companies, if they do not make these things for our kids, we're not buying their brand of phones or their brand of apps. And it's on us. It's not on the companies, but we could probably get a class action suit against them not providing something if we go and have the willpower to ask for it. And through schools, because our kids, on Grand Manan, we can't send our kids to university here, but I can send them to Berkeley. I can get them started in university, medical stuff all over the world. And the idea that we're going to cut that out because we are so unused to what the internet can do for good, that we're willing to cut off the goodness of it. And that's including talking to people around the world to stop wars and all kinds of things that our kids actually need to get used to, because I know a couple of kids that didn't get a computer or access to the internet at 14 or 15. They're not interested. They're not interested in computer. It's not their game. It's not where they grew up. They don't even know how to go look up, camping meals or how to tie knots. Or the world is open, but if you keep on closing it because of our inability to do our part, that's not right.
All right.
I was going to say, and I think that's something I want to maybe make sure is clear, is it's not about an all or nothing. It's not about keeping it away completely. There is a ton of amazing, things that kids can learn and the education options that are there. I think it is just like you said, it's giving them access to what is beneficial to them and limiting what's not. And so, you also talked about, the parents and like limits on devices. I think that is another important thing of trying to introduce limits on how much time they spend on it. On average, kids are spending 29 hours a week, 12-year-olds. Yep. That's a full-time job.
Yeah.
And so if we can... Pardon me?
The sleep, even the adults miss. I mean, that's ridiculous. But there should be definitely time. If you have not got your sleep in, then you should not be allowed on that phone, and the phone should be able to say, "Nope, I'm not working." Yeah. I mean, that's possible with these phones. It's not impossible. And the idea of teaching languages when we don't have enough French teachers, or the idea of teaching basic nursing when we don't have enough nurses, we're blocking a whole lot of things in our inability to look at ourselves and say, we have the power to tell these companies, we're not buying your type of phone unless it has these advantages for us and our kids.
All right. Very good points there, Sharon. So glad you called in. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bethany Lund is our next caller in Halifax. Hey, Bethany. Hey, Bethany, are you with us? All right. Okay, Carrie is with us. Carrie Muse in Yarmouth. Hello, Carrie.
Hi, how are you?
Very good. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I was really excited to hear you talking about the anxious generation because I read the book late summer.
Now, do you recommend that book if we're already worried about the anxious generation? Will this make us feel less anxious for them?
Yeah. It's just such an education piece, and actually, I wanted to respond. My response was to go out and buy 5 copies of it, give it to all our daughters, and to my best friend who's a elementary teacher and principal, because I think it's such an important book. It's really nails scientifically like what's going on with the past 20 years of news, and it's not about cutting it all out. It's about how do we manage it as parents and grandparents, and about play-based childhood rather than phone-based childhood. And
sorry, Carrie, I need to back up. You mentioned 2 different childhoods, and the line isn't 100%, so we missed that, or at least I did.
Okay, it's about play-based childhood.
Right.
So, teaching kids to play again outside and have an active, physically active and mentally active childhood outside is a really important part of the book. And I feel that that's something that we are kind of getting away from, and it's so important for the imagination. And I just can't tell you how good I found the book was by Jonathan Haidt, and really recommend it. Great Christmas present to buy your kids, your adult kids. Yeah.
That is a really good idea. Your adult kids with younger kids of their own.
Yeah. As a grandparent, I just think it's incredible to read this book, so I highly recommend it.
From your perspective, Carrie, as a grandparent or watching your children raise their children, it's so interesting to just reflect on, back when I was a kid in the early 80s or whatever, and, I was able to do this, and we swung around in merry-go-rounds and nobody worried about us. What do you think when you see this transition, when you see this generation of parents bubble wrap their kids to the point where they don't really have a life at all?
Well, I think that physically, in the physical world, our kids are safer than they've ever been. But I think online, they're more at danger than they've ever been. And that really becomes apparent when they're teenagers. But, we do a great job. Our society does a great job overall of looking after our children now, as opposed to, 80 years ago. We're more aware of the dangers, and we're more aware of the emotional life that they have. But online, it's like sending your kid to Mars. You just don't know what's out there. So, there's limited use of the internet and phone with supervision, but there's all kinds of solutions in the book. Yeah. Things that we can work together on that it's really, really good. It's worth the read.
All right. It's on my list. Thanks so much, Carrie.
Okay. Have a good day.
All
Bye-bye.
Right. That's going to do it. We're down to our last minute. Final thoughts from you, Jenna, on just what you heard. We've got a number of calls on this. Lots of interest.
Yeah, lots of interest. Great discussion. I appreciate everybody who called in. I think generally it seems like this is on the minds of a lot of people, and I think people are trying to figure out how to navigate it, and I'm hoping that these conversations continue. I think that's the biggest takeaway is let's keep talking. Try to have the courage to talk about those around you and see what change we can start to create.
Do you have cohorts, people who do what you do in PEI in New Brunswick?
I'm not sure they've been set up yet because This is still fairly new, but if anyone's interested, I would encourage them to reach out to Unplugged Canada.
All right, I'm sure they will. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks.
That's going to do it for Maritime Connection.